My husband sent me a text message that cost him a $150 million divorce. It said, "Don't make a scene. You're uninvited from Kevin's wedding to keep the peace." The money was a gift. So we're keeping it. He thought he was talking to his wife, the quiet event planner. He had no idea he had just texted the CEO of Morrison Hospitality, the corporation that owned every single part of that wedding. If you believe that disrespect has a price, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because this is a story about collecting the debt. The first undeniable sign that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong in my marriage didn't come from a screaming match or a dramatic discovery. It came on a Sunday evening, in the form of a cheap box of red wine. The air in my mother-in-law Carol's house always felt thick, heavy with the scent of old cooking oil and the kind of potpourri that's been sitting in a bowl since 1998. I stepped in from the crisp Phoenix evening, the heels of my Louboutins sinking slightly into the worn-out welcome mat. In my hand, I held a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from a boutique Napa vineyard, a $200 peace offering for a war I wasn't even aware I was fighting. It was a simple gesture of generosity. Nothing more. Carol took it from my hands, her fingers rough against the smooth glass. She squinted at the label, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Oh, that's very fancy, dear," she said, her smile as thin as a razor's edge. "Too fancy for a regular Sunday. I think we'll save it for a special occasion." With that, she turned and marched into the kitchen, and I watched as she shoved the bottle into the dark recesses of her pantry, hiding it behind a family-sized can of baked beans and a stack of dusty paper plates. "A moment l'été?" She returned and placed a large, garish cardboard box of red wine on the sticky linoleum counter with a triumphant thud. It had a cheap plastic spigot on the side. "This will do just fine," she announced to the room at large. My husband, Michael, appeared at my side, snaking a familiar arm around my waist. He smelled of cheap beer and the fading scent of the golf course. He kissed my cheek, his lips cool. "Smells great in here, Mom," he boomed, his voice filling the small house. Completely oblivious to the silent, symbolic execution of my gift, he didn't see the dismissal. He never did. His father's old golfing buddy, a man named Bill with a loud tie and an even louder laugh, wandered in from the back porch. Michael clapped him on the shoulder. "Bill, you know my wife, Amber?" "Right," Bill nodded politely. Michael gestured vaguely in my direction. "She helps out with event planning. Keeps her busy." "Keeps me busy," I smiled. A carefully constructed facade of pleasant neutrality I had spent 15 years perfecting. I didn't say that my little event planning hobby was actually Morrison Hospitality, a corporation I had built from the ground up, a sprawling empire of luxury hotels, exclusive venues, and high-end catering services, with a portfolio that stretched across 4 states. I didn't mention that the quarterly revenue reports I had been reviewing just that morning could have bought this entire neighborhood 10 times over. In this house, walled in by faded floral wallpaper and portraits of grandchildren, I wasn't expected to provide. I wasn't a CEO. I was just Amber, Michael's wife. The one with the quiet, inconsequential job. We all eventually migrated to the living room, sinking into floral couches that sighed under our weight. The real purpose of the evening finally revealed itself when my brother-in-law, Kevin, and his sweet fiancée, Sarah, stood up in the center of the room. They were holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white, their faces glowing with a mixture of pure joy and sheer, unadulterated terror. They were getting married. The room erupted in a chorus of congratulations. But once the initial wave of excitement passed, a heavy, suffocating cloud of financial anxiety settled over the conversation. Kevin was a high school history teacher and Sarah was a veterinary technician. They were rich in love and cripplingly short on cash. "We've been saving every penny," Kevin admitted, his voice barely rising above the hum of the ancient air conditioner. "But we've only got about $10,000. We don't know how we can afford a real wedding." The word budget was a trigger. Instantly, the family switched into their version of problem-solving mode, which was really just a grim competition for who could suggest the most frugal, soul-crushing alternative. "Oh, honey, you don't need a designer dress, my sister-in-law," Jessica chirped, her thumbs flying across her phone screen. "You can get a perfectly lovely dupe on Amazon for under $100. Look, this one has 5 stars. She shoved her phone in Sarah's face. "And forget catering," Carol declared, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of extreme thriftiness. "I'll make a giant pasta bake, 2 of them. Everyone loves a pasta bake. And it costs next to nothing. The community center down the road only charges $500 for a Saturday," Michael added, ever the pragmatist. "Sure. It has those awful plastic chairs and the lighting is terrible. But who's really looking at the chairs? It's about the love." I sat there, swirling the metallic-tasting box wine in a smudged glass, a silent observer to the dismantling of a dream. I watched Kevin and Sarah, who were trying so desperately to smile and nod and look grateful, but I saw the light in Sarah's eyes dim with every suggestion. She had dreamed of an elegant, beautiful day, a memory to cherish forever. Not a potluck supper under the fluorescent lights of a gymnasium that smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. And that's when Michael glanced at me. It was a fleeting look, one that anyone else would have missed. But I knew it intimately. It was a look of smug superiority. A silent message just for me. "See, this is the real world. Amber, this is what real families do. Not your 5-star galas and champagne fountains." He saw my life, my success, as a fantasy. Something frivolous and disconnected from the salt of the earth, reality he believed he inhabited. A cold, quiet resolve formed in my chest. It was sharp and clear and absolute. This wasn't just about giving Kevin and Sarah the wedding they deserved. It was about making a statement. It was a defiant act against 15 years of being underestimated, of being patted on the head and relegated to the background. I would give them a fairy tale wedding. And I would do it so seamlessly, so quietly. They wouldn't even know who their fairy godmother was. The next morning, I was back in my world. My corner office on the 50th floor of the Morrison Tower was a sanctuary of polished steel, cool leather, and silent efficiency. The city of Phoenix sprawled beneath me, a kingdom of my own making. I picked up my private line and dialed my executive assistant. Mark. He was more of a chief of staff, the most competent person I knew. "Mark? I have a priority project for you," I said, my voice calm and measured. "It's a personal matter." "Ready when you are, Amber," he replied. "I need you to book the Sunset Ridge estate for a Saturday 6 months from now. I want a full buyout of the property for the entire day. No other events." "Understood," he said, the familiar, comforting sound of his rapid typing filling the silence. "Next, contact Copper Canyon Catering. I want their premium package, the 6-course meal. Open bar. The works for 200 guests. Finally, I need a block of 50 rooms at our Desert Palm Resort for the out-of-town guests. From that Friday to Sunday. I paused, letting him catch up. The beneficiaries for all contracts will be Kevin Miller and Sarah Jenkins. The entire cost, every last cent, is to be billed directly to my private account. Under no circumstances is this to be logged as a corporate expense. Of course, total estimated cost will be around $40,000. That's acceptable, I confirmed. And Mark, this is the most important part, absolute discretion. My name, Michael's name, the Morrison name, none of it is to appear on any of the contracts or correspondence that the couple will see. As far as they're concerned, this is an anonymous gift. Have you got that? Loud and clear. Amber, he said. Anonymous gift. I'll handle it personally. And I'll send you an encrypted email with the confirmations for everything once it's locked in. Thank you, Mark. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Her voice was an octave higher than usual, thick with a syrupy, theatrical emotion. Amber, oh, my God. Amber, you are an absolute saint, she practically shrieked into the phone. Kevin just told us what happened. Some secret benefactor paid for everything, the Sunset Ridge estate. I mean, who does that? We all put two and two together and knew it had to be you. You're our angel. I can't even find the words. I'm just happy for them, I said, my voice polite and distant. We're all just blown away, she continued, her voice gushing. Now Sarah can get a real dress, and I can help her plan everything. She prattled on for another 10 minutes about color schemes and floral arrangements, never once asking how I was, what was new in my life, or anything that wasn't about the wedding. I was not a sister-in-law. I was a resource, a means to an end. The real gut punch landed the following Tuesday. I was in the middle of a tense negotiation for a new hotel property in Scottsdale when my private line, the one only a handful of people had, buzzed. It was the general manager of Sunset Ridge Estate, a sharp woman named Maria whom I had personally mentored. Her voice was strained, stripped of its usual confidence. Hi, Amber, she began, a clear note of distress in her tone. I'm so sorry to bother you directly, but I'm in a very awkward position. I'm calling to confirm a change request we received this morning regarding the Miller-Jenkins wedding. I leaned back in my chair, the pen in my hand stopping mid-signature. A change request from whom? It came from Mr. Michael Scott, she said, and I could hear her swallow nervously. He requested an update to the final guest list. The silence in my office was absolute. The bustling city outside my window seemed to move in slow motion. Go on, Maria. She took a shaky breath. He instructed us, via email, to remove your name from the list of attendees. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a hot, flashing anger, but a creeping, glacial freeze that started in my chest and spread to the tips of my fingers. I was a statue of ice and disbelief. I kept my voice perfectly even, a practiced mask of executive calm. I see, I said, the words feeling like foreign objects in my mouth. And the $40,000 deposit I paid in full? Maria's hesitation was my answer before she even spoke. His email stated that the funds were a non-refundable gift to the couple. She finally whispered, her apology evident in every syllable, and that all arrangements should remain as planned. I thanked her for her professionalism and disconnected the call. My hand was perfectly steady as I placed the receiver back in its cradle. I felt strangely detached. as if my soul had floated up to the ceiling and was looking down at the woman in the expensive suit sitting at the mahogany desk. This was a betrayal so brazen, so utterly contemptuous. It defied logic. My husband had not only uninvited me from an event I was single-handedly funding, but he had also made sure to secure the funds first. My phone vibrated on the polished surface of my desk. A text message from Michael. My heart, which had felt frozen just a moment before, began to hammer against my ribs. Affrontique. Trapped bird. With a hand that now trembled slightly, I picked it up and read the words that would detonate the foundations of my life. Don't make a scene. It read, "You're uninvited from Kevin's wedding to keep the peace. The money was a gift, so we're keeping it." I read the message once, twice, a third time, to keep the peace, as if my presence, the presence of his wife of 15 years, was the sole source of potential conflict. The money was a gift, so we're keeping it. The chilling finality of it. He had assessed the situation, weighed his options, and concluded that I was disposable. But my money was not. The shock began to recede, replaced by something else. Something cold and hard and powerful. It was the quiet, methodical click of a switch deep inside me. The part of me that had spent years seeking approval, being generous, and swallowing casual dismissals, went dark. A different part of me. The part that built an empire from scratch, the part that negotiated with sharks and won, came online. I turned my chair to face the window, looking out at the sprawling city that bore my family's name. Not on a single street sign, but on the top of the tallest building. A smile touched my lips. It was a grim, unfamiliar thing that felt sharp and dangerous. Drama, I thought. A silent, chilling promise, echoing in the vast emptiness of my office. "Honey, you haven't even seen drama yet." For a long moment, I didn't move. The world outside my 50th floor window continued its relentless hum, but inside my office, a profound and transformative silence had fallen. The hurt, the shock, the sting of betrayal, they were still there, but they had been flash-frozen, transformed from a messy, chaotic storm into a single, razor-sharp icicle. The part of me that had spent 15 years trying to be the perfect, accommodating wife had died with that text message. The woman left sitting in the leather chair was someone else entirely. She was a CEO. And she had just identified a hostile takeover attempt on her own life. My hand was perfectly steady as I reached for the crystal glass of water on my desk. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The cold liquid was a balm to my suddenly parched throat. I was not a victim. Victims cry. Victims feel helpless. I felt a terrifying, electrifying sense of clarity. Michael and his family had made a critical business error. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my generosity for stupidity. They had assessed my value and decided to liquidate the asset while keeping the cash. As if on cue, my phone began to ring, piercing the quiet. The caller ID flashed a picture of my sister-in-law, Jessica, a photo of her with a wide, toothy grin. I let it ring twice more, then answered, putting it on speakerphone. Amber Jessica's voice was a syrupy concoction of fake concern. "Oh, thank God you answered. We've been so worried." "Have you?" I replied, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Yes, Michael told us you were a little upset about the guest list change. I just wanted to call and explain. We were honestly just trying to protect you." "Sweetie, There it was. The first volley of gaslighting. I leaned back, studying the intricate patterns on my ceiling. Protect me from what? Exactly. Jessica. Well, you know, she stammered, the practiced sincerity already starting to fray. Things have been a little tense between you and Carol lately. We just wanted Kevin and Sarah's big day to be completely free of any drama. It was a decision we all made. For the good of the family. To keep the peace. This is for the best. You'll see. The collective shield they used to diffuse all responsibility. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. So, to be clear, I said, my tone as clinical as a surgeon's. In the interest of avoiding drama, the family collectively decided to uninvite me, but keep the $40,000 I provided. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds so transactional. She whined. It was a gift. Amber, a wonderfully generous gift. You can't put strings on a gift. We just wanted to make sure your beautiful present to them wasn't overshadowed by any awkwardness. I see, I said. It was all I needed from her. I had her script. I knew her angle. Before she could launch into another round of manipulative nonsense, I cut her off. I have another call coming in. We'll talk later. I disconnected before she could reply. Less than a minute later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Carol. Her approach was different. Not sweet, but sanctimonious. Amber. I am very disappointed. She began. Forgoing any greeting. Michael told me you're making a fuss. I raised my children to understand that marriage is about sacrifice. Sometimes, a good wife knows that her role is to step aside for the happiness of the family. My grip on my pen tightened. The cool metal. A grounding force. My presence at a family wedding is a threat to its happiness. Carol. Don't be deliberately obtuse. She snapped. Her voice sharp with condescension. This is Kevin's one special day. It is not about you. Or your feelings. It's about celebrating him and Sarah. A truly selfless person would understand that and wouldn't need it explained to them. You should learn to put the family's needs before your own pride. 15 years. For 15 years, I had listened to this woman subtly and not so subtly chip away at my self-worth. I had hosted her holidays, paid for her vacations, and listened to her endless complaints. All in the name of being a good wife. And now, after I had gifted her son a fairy tale wedding, she was calling me selfish for expecting the basic human decency of an invitation. The final illusion of family I had been clinging to shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Carol, I said, my voice eerily calm. You've made things very clear. I hung up the phone. The final call came 5 minutes later. It was Kevin. His voice was trembling. Thick with a guilt he was too cowardly to actually own. Amber, hi. It's me. I know who it is. Kevin. Listen. I just wanted to call and thank you. He stammered. For everything. The wedding. It's more than we ever could have dreamed of. We're so grateful. I waited, letting the silence hang between us. Heavy and suffocating. And, he continued. We're really sorry about the whole invitation thing. It got complicated. It was a family decision. Just to make sure the day went smoothly. You know. He was a good man. I thought. But a weak one. And in that moment, His weakness was just as toxic as his mother's cruelty or his brother's arrogance. He was a willing pawn in his own betrayal. A flicker of pity I might have felt for him was instantly extinguished. He had made his choice. He had chosen them. "So you're grateful for my money, but not for my presence," I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "Enjoy your wedding, Kevin." I ended the call. That was it. The prosecution had presented its case. The defense had offered nothing but excuses and lies. Now it was time for the judge to deliberate. I swiveled in my chair to face my computer. The anger and hurt were still there. A low, burning fire in my gut. But my mind was a sea of glass. It was time to stop thinking like a wife and start thinking like a CEO. What were my assets? What was my leverage? My fingers flew across the keyboard. I logged into the master portal for Morrison Hospitality, the central nervous system of my entire operation. In the search bar, I typed the first name, Sunset Ridge Estate. The result appeared instantly. A full profile, revenue charts, staffing details, and at the very top, in bold, unambiguous text, asset status wholly owned subsidiary of Morrison Hospitality. Acquired Q3 2018. A slow, cold thrill ran down my spine. I typed the next name. Copper Canyon Catering. The result, asset, status exclusive brand under the Morrison Gourmet division. My breath hitched. My heart was pounding now. Not with pain, but with a dawning, terrible power. One more. Desert Palm Resort, Phoenix. Asset status flagship property. Morrison Hospitality Group. It was all mine. All of it. The stunning venue with its sunset views, the exclusive caterer with its Michelin-starred chef, the 5-star luxury hotel where all their guests were planning to stay. They hadn't just taken a gift from Michael Scott's wife. They had signed a series of contracts with Amber Morrison, CEO, and they had just given me cause. I looked at the schematic of my corporate empire on the screen. It was a web of power and influence, all connected, all under my absolute control. They thought they had cut me out. They didn't realize they were playing their little family game in a house that I had built, a house where I owned the walls, the furniture, and the air they were breathing. I picked up the phone and dialed my chief legal counsel. "David, it's Amber," I said, my voice all business. "I need you to pull the master service agreements for 3 of our assets, Sunset Ridge, Copper Canyon, and the Desert Palm. I specifically need you to review the termination clauses, effective immediately. Find me any and all language pertaining to breach of contract resulting from client-side misrepresentation or unauthorized modification of the primary beneficiary agreement." "Is there a problem?" David asked, his voice sharp with concern. "Just a small one," I said, "and I'm about to solve it. I need that analysis within the hour." After I hung up, I walked over to the large whiteboard that covered one wall of my office. I picked up a black marker. On the left side, I drew a messy circle and labeled it, "The Family." I drew smaller circles branching off it, Michael arrogance divided by theft, Carol manipulation, Jessica fake sympathy, and Kevin cowardice. I wrote down their key phrases next to their names: keep the peace, sacrifice, for the good of the family. Then, on the right side of the board, I drew a large, clean square. Morrison Hospitality. I wrote at the top. Underneath, in a neat, hierarchical chart, I wrote Sunset Ridge, Copper Canyon, and Desert Palm. I stood back and looked at the two diagrams. On one side was their chaos, a tangled mess of petty emotions and deceit. On the other was my order, a structure of pure, unassailable corporate power. Then, I picked up a red marker. I drew a single, straight line from my square, and it sliced directly through theirs. It was no longer a family drama. It was a business decision. That evening, when I got home, Michael was already there, pouring 2 glasses of wine. The cheap stuff. Of course. He was trying to act normal, to pretend that his devastating text message had never been sent. He handed me a glass, a placating smile on his face. "Tough day?" he asked, his voice laced with a false concern that made my skin crawl. "You could say that," I replied, taking the glass but not drinking from it. He sat on the couch, patting the cushion next to him. "Listen, honey," he began, launching into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "I know you're upset, but everyone's just worried about you. They don't want you to feel stressed or uncomfortable. You need to try and see it from their side. Don't make this whole thing more complicated than it needs to be." I looked at him. This man I had shared a bed with for 15 years. I looked at his handsome, oblivious face, and I felt nothing. No love. No anger. Not even pity. It was like looking at a stranger. A poorly written character in a play I was no longer interested in watching. He thought he was in control. He thought he was managing me. He had absolutely no idea what was coming. I placed my untouched glass of wine on the coffee table and looked him directly in the eye, letting a small, serene smile touch my lips. "Oh, it's not complicated at all, darling," I said, my voice soft and dangerously calm. "It's actually very simple." Michael stared at me for a long moment after I said those words, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He was searching my face for the familiar tells of anger or hurt. But they weren't there. He was looking for his wife, the woman he thought he knew how to manage. But she was gone. He saw only a serene, unreadable calm. Unable to process it, he did what he always did when faced with something he didn't understand. He dismissed it. He gave a short, condescending laugh, shook his head as if I were a silly child, and turned up the volume on the television. The conversation, in his mind, was over. He had no idea that the war had just begun. I slept in the guest room that night, not out of anger, but out of a need for strategic distance. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I moved through the quiet, dark house with a newfound purpose. There was no rage in my movements, no frantic energy. There was only the cold, clean efficiency of a plan set in motion. I did my usual 60-minute workout, pushing myself harder than usual, feeling the burn in my muscles as a welcome, grounding sensation. I showered, the hot water washing away the last lingering traces of the woman I used to be. I dressed not in one of my usual soft business dresses, but in a charcoal gray Armani power suit that I reserved for the most hostile of negotiations. Every choice was deliberate. Every action had intent. This was my armor. When I walked into the kitchen, Michael was there, fumbling with the coffee machine, still in his pajamas. He looked up, surprised to see me fully dressed for war at 6 a.m. "Wow, you're up early," he said, trying for a casual tone. "Big day." "You could say that," I replied, bypassing the coffee and pouring myself a glass of iced water. "I have a series of calls to make." He watched me, a sliver of unease finally penetrating his thick skull. My calm was more unnerving to him than any fight would have been. I didn't give him a chance to ask more questions. I picked up my briefcase and walked out the door, the click of my heels on the marble floor echoing behind me like the countdown on a timer. I was in my office by 6:30. The sun was just beginning to cast a golden glow over the city. I sat at my desk, not working, but waiting. I had set the dominoes up perfectly. All I had to do now was let gravity do its work. I had instructed the heads of the 3 divisions to make their calls between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. I pictured the scene, a triptych of panic I had personally commissioned. The first domino, I imagined, fell at precisely 8:05 a.m. Kevin would have been in his classroom, preparing his lesson plan on the American Revolution. His mind filled with happy thoughts of flower arrangements and cake tastings. His phone would have buzzed on his desk. An unknown number. He would have answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Is this Mr. Kevin Miller?" A crisp, professional voice would have asked. It would have been the voice of Maria, the general manager of Sunset Ridge Estate. I had coached her myself. "Yes. Speaking." Kevin would have replied, a smile in his voice. "Mr. Miller, I'm calling from Sunset Ridge. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Due to an unforeseen and critical internal contractual issue, we are forced to cancel your event booking for the date of your wedding. We will, of course, be refunding your deposit in full." I imagined the blood draining from Kevin's face. The confusion. The stammering. "Wait. What a contractual issue. What does that even mean? You can't just cancel. Our wedding is in 6 months. I'm deeply sorry." "Sire?" Maria's voice would have been a wall of polite, impenetrable corporate policy. "The decision is final and has come from our corporate ownership. A formal email confirmation of this cancellation has just been sent to you." And then, the click of the line disconnecting. The second domino would have fallen 30 minutes later. Sarah, probably in between appointments at the veterinary clinic, would have seen an email pop up on her phone. The subject line, "Urgent cancellation of your catering service." Her hands would have trembled as she opened it. The email, drafted by my legal team, would have been a masterpiece of corporate jargon. Citing a non-compliance with Clause 12(4) of the Master Service Agreement regarding beneficiary verification, it would have stated, in no uncertain terms, that Copper Canyon Catering was terminating their services for the Miller-Jenkins wedding, effective immediately. Her dream of a 6-course gourmet meal, replaced by a wall of terrifyingly official text. The final, and perhaps most chaotic, domino would have fallen on Jessica. She would have been at her salon, probably gossiping with a client under a hairdryer. Her phone would have rung. It would have been the front desk manager of the Desert Palm Resort. "Mrs. Scott, I'm calling regarding the block of 50 rooms reserved under the Miller-Jenkins wedding party." "Yes," Jessica would have said, annoyed at the interruption. "I regret to inform you that due to a critical system-wide overbooking error, we are unable to honor the reservation. The entire block has been cancelled." I could almost hear her shriek. "Overbooking, you're a 5-star resort. You don't just overbook 50 rooms. Our guests are flying in from all over the country. Where are they supposed to stay? We understand your frustration." The manager, another one of my well-trained people, would say, "We are happy to suggest some alternative hotels in the area." And that would have been that. The dream wedding, so generously gifted, had been systematically and completely dismantled in the space of an hour. The first frantic call came to my assistant's desk at 9:15. It was Jessica. And she was hysterical. "Mark. My unflappable assistant. Put her on hold and buzzed my office. It's a Mrs. Scott. She's insistent. Let her wait, I said calmly. Let them all wait. I spent the next 2 hours in a state of productive silence. I signed off on the Scottsdale acquisition. I reviewed the quarterly marketing budget. I was a portrait of corporate efficiency while I knew, on the other side of the city, their world was imploding. I imagined the frantic family meeting, probably convened in Carol's stuffy living room. Carol, I was certain, would be blaming Sarah's family for having some kind of bad luck or secret curse. Jessica would be weeping, wailing about the humiliation of having to call 200 guests to tell them the wedding was off. Kevin and Sarah would be in a state of catatonic shock. And Michael would be pacing, his face red with fury, trying to project an aura of control in a situation where he had none. I could hear his voice in my head, booming and arrogant. It has to be a competitor, someone is trying to sabotage me, and then the inevitable suspicion. Wait a second, Amber. I could picture Carol scoffing. Don't be ridiculous. Michael. What could she possibly do? She organizes flowers for a living. She couldn't orchestrate something like this. That was the lie. The fatal miscalculation upon which their entire worldview was built. They couldn't conceive of me having this kind of power because they had never bothered to see me as powerful. It was Kevin, in his quiet desperation, who stumbled upon the first clue. As I'd hoped, he had tried calling the vendors back himself. He got a brand new concierge at the Desert Palm, a young man who hadn't been properly briefed on the protocol. I'm sorry, sire, but the cancellation order for the Miller party came directly from the top, the young man said, trying to be helpful. It was an executive directive from the Morrison office. The name just hung in the air. Morrison. My name. But to them, it was just a name. Kevin would have mentioned it to the family. The kid at the hotel said something about Morrison. He would have said, confused. Like the big company downtown? It didn't make any sense. They would have dismissed it as a coincidence. A mistake. The truth was too big, too world-altering for them to comprehend. The confrontation I was expecting came just after noon. The door to my office flew open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Michael stood there, his face a mask of purple rage, his tie askew. What did you do? He roared, his voice echoing in the large, quiet space. I didn't flinch. I slowly looked up from the report I was reading, my expression one of mild curiosity. I'm sorry. You'll have to be more specific. I've done a great many things today. Don't play dumb with me. Amber, he spat, stomping towards my desk. The venue, the caterer, the hotel, all canceled. All on the same morning. This has your name written all over it. You are sabotaging my brother's wedding out of spite. That's a very serious accusation. Michael, I said, my voice dangerously soft. I slowly closed the file in front of me and folded my hands on the desk. And a fascinating one. Why on earth would I do that? Because you're petty, because you weren't invited, you're destroying Kevin's happiness because of your own selfish, unstable emotions. I let him finish. Let the toxic accusations hang in the air between us. Then, I leaned forward slightly. Michael, I am not familiar with the details of your brother's personal arrangements with his vendors. That's between him and them. Perhaps he should have read his contracts more carefully. Contracts? What contracts? You paid for it? Did I? I raised an eyebrow. I made a generous, anonymous gift. If Kevin and Sarah chose to enter into agreements with vendors who have now canceled on them, That sounds like a legal matter for them to pursue. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. He stared at me, dumbfounded. He was trying to have a messy, emotional, domestic fight. And I was responding with the cold, a hard logic of a corporate lawyer. He had no weapons for this kind of battle. I know it was you, he seethed, pointing a trembling finger at me. And you are going to fix this. I don't think so, I said, standing up. I walked around the desk and stood by the window, looking down at the city below. You and your family made it very clear that my involvement in this wedding was not welcome. I am simply respecting your wishes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. You can see yourself out. He stood there for another moment, utterly defeated, breathing heavily. He had come in like a lion and was leaving like a scolded child. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I waited exactly 5 minutes. Then, I sent the email. It was sent from the official, encrypted server of my executive office. The sender was listed not as Amber Scott, but as Office of the President, Morrison Hospitality. It was addressed to Michael, Kevin, Jessica, and Carol. The subject line was simple: urgent meeting regarding cancelled event contracts. The body of the email was brief and glacial. To whom it may concern. You are hereby summoned to a mandatory meeting to discuss the recent multiple contract terminations related to the Miller-Jenkins event. The meeting will take place today at 2 p.m. sharp. The location is the main boardroom on the 50th floor of the Morrison Tower. Please be prompt. Regards. Executive Office, Morrison Hospitality. The final domino had not just fallen, it had been fired from a cannon. I imagined the 4 of them, huddled together, reading that email on a phone screen. The confusion, the dawning horror, and that one terrifying word. Morrison. They would have driven downtown in a state of numb disbelief. They would have parked in the visitor's garage beneath my tower. And then, they would have walked into the grand IT, cathedral-like lobby. A space I had designed to inspire awe and intimidation in equal measure. They would have looked up at the massive, brushed steel letters mounted on the marble wall behind the security desk, Morrison. They would have stood there, small and insignificant under the weight of that name. The name they had taken for granted for 15 years. And as the truth, in all its terrible, world-shattering glory, finally crashed down upon them. My assistant, Mark, would have been walking across the lobby to greet them, his expression polite and impassive. Mr. Scott, Mr. Miller, welcome, he would say, his voice echoing in the vast space. President Morrison is waiting for you. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was completely silent. I wasn't there. But I could imagine it perfectly. The 4 of them, trapped in a mirrored box, ascending toward their judgment. They wouldn't have looked at each other. They would have stared at their own pale, distorted reflections under the cool LED lights. The terrible truth of the name on the building directory, settling upon them like a shroud. My chief of staff, Mark, led them down the long, silent hallway. The floors were polished Italian marble that reflected the museum-quality art on the walls, pieces I had personally curated, each one worth more than their house. This wasn't just an office, it was a testament to a life they had refused to see. Mark opened the heavy glass doors to the main boardroom and stood aside. They're here. Amber, he said, his voice a quiet murmur through my earpiece. I was already seated at the head of the table, It was a single, 50-foot slab of polished black granite that felt as cold as a tombstone. Behind me, the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the entire city of Phoenix. A sprawling kingdom laid out at my feet. My chief legal counsel, David, sat to my right, a leather-bound portfolio in front of him. We were not family here. We were executives conducting a damage assessment. They filed in, one by one, looking small and utterly out of place. Carol clutched her handbag to her chest like a life preserver. Jessica's face had gone the color of parchment. All the fake salon tan drained from it. Kevin and Sarah clung to each other, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. And Michael, my husband. He walked in last, his usual arrogant swagger completely gone, replaced by the hesitant, shuffling gait of a man walking to his own execution. They took the seats opposite me at the far end of the vast table, looking like shipwreck survivors on a raft. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the whisper-quiet hum of the climate control. I let them sit in that silence for a full minute, letting the weight of the room, the view, and their own monumental error press down on them. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm and devoid of inflection, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. Thank you for coming. Carol opened her mouth to say something, a protest or a plea, but I held up a single hand, and she fell silent. I did not call this meeting to have a discussion. I continued, my eyes moving from one shattered face to the next. I called it to present a statement of fact, followed by a series of non-negotiable terms. David is here to bear witness. I picked up a small remote and aimed it at the 85-inch screen that took up most of the front wall. The screen, which had been displaying a serene image of a desert landscape, went black. Then, a single, elegant logo appeared in the center. It was the stylized sunset emblem of the Sunset Ridge estate. I clicked again. The Sunset Ridge logo slid to the left, and the rustic, chic logo of Copper Canyon Catering appeared beside it. I clicked a third time. The two logos slid over to make room for the sophisticated palm tree insignia of the Desert Palm Resort. The three logos hung there in the silence, a perfect visual representation of their dream wedding. I could see the confusion on their faces, the question mark hanging in the air. Then, I clicked one last time. A new logo materialized in the center of the screen. It was larger, bolder, the sleek, powerful M of the Morrison Hospitality Group. It expanded, moving like a tidal wave across the screen, swallowing the three smaller logos until they were nothing but faint outlines behind my corporate brand. The name, Morrison Hospitality, glowed in a soft, merciless white. Are there any questions? I asked into the crushing silence. Carol let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her throat. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. Kevin just stared, his mind clearly struggling to connect the dots. It was Michael who finally spoke, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper. It's all yours. Every last brick. I replied, my voice as cold and hard as the granite table. The venue you thought was so perfect. The caterer you were so excited about. The hotel where you planned to house your 200 guests. I don't just help out with event planning. Michael, I own the board. I own the pieces. And I own the game. The full weight of the truth finally landed. It was a physical blow. Michael slumped in his chair, his face a ruin of disbelief and dawning horror. He wasn't just married to a successful woman. He was married to a titan, a queen in a kingdom he never even knew existed. And he had just tried to have her thrown out of her own castle. Now, I said, my tone shifting from declarative to transactional. We come to the terms. Your actions constituted a material breach of contract, not to mention a significant personal and professional insult. As such, restitution is required for any consideration of reinstatement. David slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward them. First, I began, ticking the points off in my mind. The matter of the $40,000 gift. That money is to be returned to me. In addition, a penalty of $35,000 will be assessed for breach of contract and reputational damages. A total of $75,000 will be transferred via wire to an account specified by my lawyer. You have 48 hours to make the payment in full. Jessica made a choked sound. $75,000 was more than she made in a year. Second, I continued, ignoring her. A public apology is required. Michael, Carol, and Jessica, you will each draft a statement. It will acknowledge your deceitful and disrespectful actions. It will be posted to all your social media accounts, and it will remain there, undeleted, for a minimum of 1 year. David will approve the wording before you post. The humiliation of that demand washed over them. Their carefully constructed social lives, their church friends, their golf buddies, all of it would be shattered. And third, I said, my eyes locking on Kevin and Sarah, should you meet the first two conditions, a wedding may proceed. Not at Sunset Ridge. That property is no longer available to you. It will take place at our smaller slummer, but still elegant, Canyon View Lodge. The guest list will be reduced to a maximum of 40 people, and during the reception, Kevin, you will make a speech. In that speech, you will publicly thank me for my generosity. And you will publicly acknowledge the profound and painful lesson in integrity that your family has learned. You will tell the entire story. I stood up, the legs of my chair making no sound on the plush carpet. You have 48 hours to comply with all terms. If the wire transfer is not confirmed and the apologies are not posted within that time frame, all Morrison Hospitality assets and services will be permanently unavailable to you and your extended family. Forever. The clock started the moment you walked into this room. I turned to leave. Mark will show you out. That night, just before the deadline, the wire transfer for $75,000 appeared in the designated account. An hour later, 3 humiliating, lawyer-approved apologies appeared on Facebook. Michael's was stiff and formal. Carol's was dripping with self-pity. Jessica's was a rambling, incoherent mess. But they were there. They had complied. The first person to truly understand, the first person to reach out with genuine remorse, was Kevin. He called me the next morning, his voice clear and steady for the first time in weeks. Amber, he said, and there were no excuses in his tone. There's nothing I can say. Sorry isn't enough. We were wrong. I was wrong. I was a coward. I let my family's toxicity and my own fear dictate my actions. And I betrayed your incredible kindness. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. We will honor every single one of your conditions. And they did. The wedding took place a few weeks later at the Canyon View Lodge. I was there. Not as a guest. Not as family. But as the owner of the venue, observing from the back of the room to ensure the terms of our new agreement were met. It was a small, subdued affair, filled with an atmosphere of quiet reflection rather than ostentatious celebration. During the reception, Kevin stood up, his hands trembling as he held a microphone. He looked directly at me, across the room, and he told the story. All of it. He spoke of his family's arrogance, his own weakness, and my quiet, immense generosity. He spoke of the painful lesson they had learned about respect, integrity, and the true meaning of family. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Sarah stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, a look of profound gratitude and shame on her face. Atonement had been made. The debt had been paid. The morning after the wedding, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see Michael standing on the porch, holding a pathetic-looking bouquet of grocery store roses. I opened the door. "Amber," he began, his voice pleading. "Please, can we just talk? I've been such a fool." "I see that now. You're amazing. What you've built is amazing. I was just intimidated, scared. Please, give me another chance." I looked at him, at this stranger who had shared my name for 15 years. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a vast, empty sense of finality. Behind me, in the foyer, my last 2 suitcases were packed and waiting by the door. "Goodbye, Michael," I said, my voice soft but absolute. "Enjoy your life without my support." I closed the door gently in his face, walked past my suitcases, and out through the garage. I got into my Range Rover and didn't look back. A few months later, I was standing in my new office in Scottsdale, the headquarters of our latest expansion. The divorce had been finalized quickly and quietly. The story of what my executive team had started calling the Cascade Protocol had become a quiet legend in the hospitality industry, attracting a new wave of clients and partners who valued strength and integrity. Last week, I received a letter. It was from Kevin and Sarah. They had used the money they'd received as wedding gifts to start a small scholarship fund at the high school where Kevin taught. It was called the Amber Morrison Integrity Scholarship, awarded each year to a student who demonstrated courage and moral character in the face of pressure. I looked out my new window at the sun setting over the desert, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. For 15 years, I had tried to buy my husband's respect with a quiet, endless generosity. I thought if I just gave enough, did enough, was enough, he and his family would finally see me. But I realize now that self-respect isn't something you can get from someone else. It's something you claim for yourself. I had lost a husband and an entire family. But in the wreckage, I had finally, truly, found myself,